As I've been warning for months, America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen. We are once again at one of those hinge moments of history. Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade, anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons.
But you're going to take us forward.
We have to look out for ourselves, and above all, we have to take care of each other. And my message to every Canadian is this: no matter where you live, no matter what language you speak, no matter how you voted, I will always do my best to represent everyone who calls Canada home.
Breaking overnight, this stunning political comeback thanks to and at the expense of President Trump. Canada's Liberal Party, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, declared victory overnight despite being really left for dead several months ago. But then Donald Trump took office, targeted Canada with tariffs, and threatened to annex it as the 51st state.
America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen.
That was the main campaign issue, and this is what Donald Trump has said about Canada over the last several months.
And we can't let them take advantage of the U.S. What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state. Canada only works as a state. We don't need anything they have. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S. If we make it in the United States, we don't need it to be made in Canada. We'll have the jobs. That's why Canada should be our 51st state. So when I say they should be a state, I mean that. I really mean that. Because we can't be expected to carry a country. I do like the O Canada, right? It's a beautiful thing. I think we're going to have to keep it for the 51st state. I call him Governor Trudeau.
All right, how decisive was President Trump in the Canadian election? Our friend Jonathan Martin at Politico heard from Republican Congressman Don Bacon overnight. Yes, Republican Congressman. Bacon told him, quote, "The Liberals in Canada were losing big until our president kept mocking Canadians, our neighbors and close friends. He made Canadian Liberals great again." Let's get right to CNN's Paula Newton in Ottawa for this really election stunner. 4 months ago, no one would have predicted this.
And good morning, John. In fact, Donald Trump's first 100 days consequential here in Canada. John, this was so history-making that when you speak to pollsters, they talk about not having seen this kind of party resurrection in modern political history in almost any democracy around the world. Think about that. And that was because the man, Prime Minister Mark Carney, met the moment with what? His resume. He's not exactly the most charismatic campaigner, but Canadians put their faith in him in order to bargain, to negotiate with Donald Trump. And I want to talk about something else as well, something that will reverberate in many different countries right now going forward as they all face the Trump administration. Mark Carney harnessed that anger, that betrayal that Canadians felt every time the president spoke about a 51st state or Governor Trudeau, which of course was the man that Mark Carney took over from. He harnessed that. He stiffens spines, he talks about sacrifice, and he's getting Canadians ready for what will be a tough negotiation with the president. Listen.
When I sit down with President Trump, it will be to discuss the future economic and security relationship between two sovereign nations. And it will be with our full knowledge that we have many, many other options than the United States to build prosperity for all Canadians.
Mark Carney calling this a hinge moment, right? That pivot, which he intends to execute now that he is Prime Minister. John, I want to make clear this was a close election in terms of the popular vote. Canada really splitting between the Liberals of Mark Carney and the Conservatives of Pierre Poilievre. That man did not manage to even win his seat just outside here in Ottawa. Some people called him too Trumpian, but he too is at historic highs in the popular vote. What does all that mean? It means Canada itself, stop me when this sounds familiar, is really leaning on two-party politics. They want strong leaders to face the kind of threat that is coming from the White House. And right now, Mark Carney says he is getting ready for negotiations, using the word, again, John, of sacrifice, preparing Canadians for what's to come. John?
Really could have ripple effects all around the world in terms of what Donald Trump is trying to do. Paula Newton, great to see you this morning. Thank you very much.
So let's get more on the Canadian election now from Professor Michael Keating, Emeritus Professor of Politics at the University of Aberdeen and Honorary Professor at the University of Edinburgh. Appreciate you joining us. So Canada's Liberal Party is projected to win the federal election led by Mark Carney in a stunning political comeback. Votes are still being counted, but how do you expect this to land in the end?
It's not clear whether Carney will get an absolute majority, but he will certainly form the next government because he's the biggest party. They're ahead in the popular vote. If he doesn't get a majority, he'll have to seek support from the smaller parties, most likely the New Democratic Party, which is a centre-left party, which has been doing very badly, but they may pick up half a dozen seats, and that might be critical to forming the next government.
Now, in his victory speech, Carney asked, and I'm quoting here, "Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?" How much of this Liberal Party win was due to the Trump factor, with Donald Trump's trade war with Canada and, of course, his constant threats to make the country the 51st US state?
Oh, a great deal. Canadians are very proud of their independence. They don't dislike the United States, but they're very keen to tell you that they are not Americans, they're not part of the United States. So that kind of language is going to produce a reaction. All the parties in Canada, Quebec nationalists included, had to say, no, we'll stand up for Canada. But Carney was the most effective in doing that because the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, had been seen as having some affinities with Trump and as quite close to Trump. So Carney was the one who is in a better position to speak in defense of Canada. It should be said, however, the Conservative vote also went up. Both parties went up, and at the expense of the small parties. I mentioned the New Democratic Party. There's a Quebec Nationalist Party, the Bloc Québécois, who may get some seats in Parliament as well. So a win for Carney, but not an overwhelming win, because nevertheless it's remarkable because they were 25 points behind just a few months ago. I've never seen such a massive turnaround in such a short period of time in any democratic system.
Yes, of course. And Mark Carney is a Harvard-educated economist with a master's degree and doctorate from Oxford University. He's also a former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. So how will he likely take on Donald Trump and his tariffs? And how will he prevent a recession in Canada?
Well, that's remarkable. He's an Oxford-educated banker. He's just the sort of people that the populists would target. That is quite remarkable. Hardly an ordinary man of the people, but nevertheless, he speaks with some authority. And at a time of uncertainty like this, people are looking for somebody who doesn't have political experience, but has a lot of credibility and has run two central banks. The challenges facing the country are enormous. Even without the threat from President Trump, there are problems with growth, problems with productivity, there are problems with inflation and the cost of living. These are big problems, and Canada's dependence on energy is in some sense a strength, but it's also a weakness at a time when we're supposed to be transitioning to net to zero. As far as Trump is concerned, this is a huge challenge. Carney has certainly been able to speak up for Canada and to criticize Trump very frankly in a way that some other leaders, such as the British leader, have not been able to. But he's got to deal with the United States. The United States takes 85% of Canada's trade. There's got to be some kind of deal. Otherwise, the economic consequences for Canada could be quite devastating.
Michael Keating, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.